Hi everyone, welcome back. So let's continue this Eon topic, which is citizenship and spinning wheel. So let's start with our new subtopic, which is the manual craft weren't just a protest against the British, but the key to universal self-realization in India. So let's start with the first pieces. Let's see what sulfur is. So at first, the school would need to teach the crafts to ensure they were known to everyone and to violate caste prohibition on manual labor. But once the crafts were widely known and the caste prohibition were no more, the craft could be learned at home and the school could be turned to their true purpose, preparing young people to rule themselves. Gandhi called this self-rule Swaraj. So here comes the Swaraj into the picture, introduction of Swaraj. So what in this passage, what Mahatma Gandhi tried to say is that, so at first the school would need to teach the craft to ensure they were known to everyone and to violate caste prohibition on manual labor. So here Mahatma Gandhi says that it is the duty of schools to teach everyone a craft so that we can violate a caste prohibition on manual labors. Means every caste of the people should know the craft and they should work on it. Not it is restricted to only one caste of the people. But once the craft were widely known and the caste prohibition were no more, the craft could be learned at home and the school could be turned to their true purpose, preparing young people to rule themselves. So further, Mahatma Gandhi says that once the craft were widely known and the caste prohibition were no more, the craft could be learned at home and the schools could be turned to their true purpose, preparing young people to rule themselves. So here come what the main purpose of craft introduction to everyone by Mahatma Gandhi is. He wants the craft is learned to everyone, and there is no caste prohibition to do that particular traditional work. Now, the school role is come into the figure, which is preparing young people to rule themselves because now they learn the craft at home by their parents. So now school responsibility to provide the spiritual knowledge and self-development knowledge to them, and this call this whole process is Mahatma Gandhi called this self-rule Swaraj. Self-rule, which means Swaraj means now we know how to earn money, but along with that, we're also aware about spiritual and the self-development knowledge, which which free ourselves from any kind of a rules and regulation. Now we are a self-ruler, and those self-rulers are called Swaraj. So what the title should given to this particular passage is Introduction of Swaraj. And what are the main points we can take from here? School would need to teach the craft to ensure they were known to everyone, to violate caste prohibition on manual labor. Once the craft were widely known and the caste prohibition were no more, the craft could be learned at home and the school could be learn at home. This line, the school could be turned to their true purpose, preparing young people to rule themselves. That is called Swaraj. Let's moving toward the next pieces. By the emphasis of craft, for Gandhi, only the traditional craft were universally available to Indians, even under British rule. Training Indians as a farmers would not work as long as ownership of farmland remained concentrated. Indian farm workers would be made to work long hours as agricultural laborers unless and until the land could be redistributed. And that could happen only after the departure of the British. Gandhi believed it was necessary to prepare for Swaraj immediately, and the craft presented themselves with a practical and political appeal. So, This whole passage is about why Mahatma Gandhi chosen craft only. Why not any other thing like farming? So this paragraph starts with the question of author itself, that why the emphasis on craft. For Gandhi, only the traditional craft were universally available to Indians under the British rule. So here Mahatma Gandhi answer the author's question that only the traditional crafts were universally available to the Indians under Britishers' rule. Only craft is under their control, other than everything is controlled by British. Training Indians as farm workers would not work as long as ownership of farmland remained concentrated. So here Mahatma Gandhi says that training of Indian as a farmers would not work because the ownership of land is our Indian the ownership of our land is under Britishers control. So we can't freely do whatever we want. Indian farm workers would be made to work long hours as agricultural labor unless and until the land could be redistributed. That could happen only after the departure of the Britishers. So here Mahatma Gandhi says that Indian farm workers works equally long hours as agricultural laborers because we can free from all this only when the departure of Britishers from India. They made our farmers work equally as agricultural laborers. The Gandhi believed it was necessary to prepare for Swaraj immediately. The craft presented themselves with practical and political appeal. So here Mahatma Gandhi believed that we need to prepare for Swaraj immediately, and the craft only the craft represent themselves and the craft themselves represent a practical and political appeal. So the title given to this passage is why the emphasis on craft. So what the important points we can pick from this passage is only the traditional craft were universally available to Indians even under the British rule. The training engine as a farmers would not work as long as ownership of farmland remained concentrated. Indian farm workers would be made to work as long as agricultural laborers. The necessary to prepare for Swaraj immediately, and the craft presented themselves with practical and political appeal. So let's moving toward the next pieces. It would be possible to revive the craft only if Indians made a point to exclusively purchase products made by traditional methods. For the crafts to survive in the long term, Indians would have to continue the anti-colonial protest against manufactured goods even after independence. For Gandhi, the manual craft weren't just a protest against the British, they remain central to producing conditions for universal self-realization in India. So this point in this whole passage, what Mahatma Gandhi tried to say is that it would be possible to revive the craft only if Indians made a point to exclusively purchase products made by traditional method. So here Mahatma Gandhi says that we can the traditional craft survived or create it give us a freedom only if we Indians purchase a product made by traditional methods only. For the craft to survive in long term, Indian would have to continue the anti-colonial protest against the manufactured goods even after independence. So for our independence, if we get independence, we need to continue our protest against manufactured goods to make our traditional crafts survived in long term so that no one again can rule over us. For Gandhi, the manual craft weren't just a protest against the British. They remained central to producing conditions for universal self-realization in India. So here Mahatma Gandhi says that traditional manual craft is not just only the protest against the British, just not only the way to get freedom from Britishers, but but this remains central producing condition for universal self-realization in India. But through the traditional product, we make us to realize that we have our power on ourselves. Nobody can rule over us because we have power. For that self-realization, our traditional product, is play a very vital role. So, what the title should give in to this pieces, what we need to do to survive our traditional craft in long term. So, what the important points we can pick from this pieces, Indians made a point to exclusively purchase product made by traditional method. Indian would have to continue the anti-colonial protest against manufactured good even after independence. The manual craft weren't just a protest against the British, they remained central to producing conditions for universal self-realization in India. So let's moving toward the next pieces. As the Second World War drew to close, Gandhi grew concerned that India's independence would come too early. Before this was properly grasped by others independence leader. His friend Nehru disagreed with him about the traditional craft. In a letter to Nehru, Gandhi argued that by performing a quota of manual labor, the people could rest content with the real needs, freeing them up for spiritual learning. Nehru countered that traditional villages were backward intellectually and culturally, and that an economy based on primitive technology would be isolated and uncompetitive. So, in this passage, author says as the Second World War drew to close, Gandhi grew concerned that independence would come too early before this was properly grasped by other independence leaders. So, by the about to end of the Second World War, Mahatma Gandhi concerned that India would get independence too early before it was properly grasped by other independence leaders. That India, before as the Second World War about to end, we get our independence even way earlier than we think about. Before any other independence leader grasps about our conditions. His friend Nehru disagreed with him about the traditional craft. So here comes into the picture of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who is disagree about the traditional craft. In a letter to Nehru, Gandhi argued that by performing a quota of manual labor, the people could rest content with their real need and freeing them up for spiritual learning. So, in a letter to Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi argued that why the traditional craft is important. Performing a quota of manual labor, the people could rest content with their real need and freeing them up for spiritual learning. So here Mahatma Gandhi says that for performing a quota of manual labor, the other people, if we perform a only quota to a manual labor, the rest are not identify what their needs. Even they are not, so we can free them from any spiritual learning. So they are not aware about it. They don't know about all these things, their needs. They don't interested in learning about the spirituality. So that's why it's important. Nehru countered that the traditional villages were backward intellectually and culturally, and that's an economy based on primitive technology would be isolated and uncompetitive. So here Mahatma Gandhi gave his point that backward in traditional villages are extremely backward intellectually and culturally. That's why our economy, our primitive technology would not work as efficient. And even it's an isolated and uncompetitive. So the title should given to this particular passage is Argument between Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And what the important points we can pick from here? The Second World War grew too close, independence would come too early. That's and what important Nehru disagreement with Gandhi about the traditional craft. Gandhi argued that by performing a quota of manual labor, the people could reach the content with their real needs and freeing them from spiritual learning. This whole Nehru says that the traditional villagers were backward intellectually and culturally. An economy based on primitive knowledge would be isolated and uncompetitive. So let's moving toward the next pieces. For Gandhi, Nehru has missed the point. As long as Indians could produce all the necessary of life through the traditional craft and they refrained from purchasing industrial goods, there were no need to make the economy competitive. What good is it to make the economy competitive if that means that most people will have to spend all their time struggling to earn a living? What kind of a life is that? How are people who live that way means to find the time to politics and spirituality? Such a country would be riven with violence and exploitation. From Gandhi's point of view, it would be hardly any difference from British India. So here Mahatma Gandhi says that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru missed the point here. And what the point he missed? As long as Indian could produce all necessaries of life through the traditional craft and they refrained from purchasing industrial goods, there were no need to make economy competitive. So he said, when the Indians are efficient to produce all our necessity through the traditional craft, why we need to economy? Why we need economically competitive? What good is to make the economy competitive if that means that most people will have to spend all their time struggling to earn living? So here Mahatma Gandhi says that what what is good in making economy competitive if it means that all the people have to spend their time struggling to earn living? Means if we make economic competitive, what it means? It means that all the people who are working, they just keep on working, spending, and they have spending all their time in working and struggling. Then what's the means of having a good economy if you're not having a time to learn spirituality or anything? And what kind of life is that? How are the people who live that way means to find the time to politics and spirituality? So here Mahatma Gandhi says that if we keep on engaging ourselves in working and for working for earning a living, what kind of a life is that? When we don't have time for politics and spirituality. Such a country would be riven with violence and exploitation. If that things happen in any country, the condition of that country is completely with violence and exploitation. From Gandhi's point of view, it would be hardly any difference from British India. And if that condition works, Then what's the difference between living under a British India rule? That's the same thing. That's both serves the same purpose. So what the writer should give into this species is what point Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru missed. And what we can take from here is a engine could produce all necessaries of life to the traditional craft. They refrain from purchasing industrial goods. There is no need to make economy competitive. Economy competitive means that most people will have to spend all their time struggling to earn a living, or what kind a living. The country with economy competitive with riven with violence and exploitation. So that's all. Let's moving toward the next pieces. After this exchange of letter in 1945, Gandhi became increasingly focused on preserving the traditional craft, especially spinning clothes on the traditional spinning wheel. He emphasized the spinning wheel ever more heavily, so much so that even so this day the wheel lies at the center of the Indian flag. So after this exchange of letter in 1945, Mahatma Gandhi became increasingly focused on preserving traditional crafts, especially spinning clothes on traditional spinning wheels. After the exchange of letter with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi diverted his focus completely on preserving a traditional craft, and especially by using a spinning clothes on traditional spinning wheels. In Hindi, we use that a charkha, which is still the symbol of our international flag. He emphasized the spinning wheel even more heavily, so much so that even on this day, the wheel lies in the center of Indian flag. So, in today's, we just, I can say, we worship that will, so that we worship so will that still it's a symbol of our national flag. So, what's the focus of Mahatma Gandhi after exchange of letter with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru? Increasingly focused on preserving traditional craft, especially spinning clothes on traditional spinning wheel. And the wheel lies at the center of the Indian flag. So let's moving toward the next species. After the Second World War ended in 1945, independence was imminent, with very little time left to win the argument. Gandhi became suspicious to the other Indian independence leader. In the late 1945, Gandhi accused them of wanting to destroy Khadi. In 1946, he emphasized that the introduction of the industrial spinning mill is so corrosive of his political project that if a tyrant wants to destroy the spinning wheel itself, we should ourselves perish with the spinning wheel and not live to witness its destruction. He insisted that spinning is the only way to achieve Swaraj for the poorest of the poor and the weakest of the weak. So, here Mahatma Gandhi says that after the Second World War ended in 1945, independence was imminent. After the end of the Second World War in the year 1945, our independence is imminent. We can get the independence anytime soon with very little time left with sorry with very little time left to win the argument, Gandhi became suspicious of other Indian independence leader. As a very less time left for our independence, but Mahatma Gandhi gets suspicious about some of our Indian freedom independence leaders. In the late of 1945, Gandhi accused them of wanting to destroy Gandhi. So some of our independent leaders are not agreeing with promoting khadi. They are against it. So Mahatma Gandhi accused them for doing that. In 1946, he emphasized that the introduction of the industrial spinning mill is so coercive to his political project that if Trident wants to destroy the spinning wheel itself, we should ourselves perish with spinning wheel and not live to witness its destruction. So here Mahatma Gandhi in the year 1946 emphasized that if anyone try to destroy this spinning wheel, we destroy ourselves with this wheel. And he said that he don't want to live in this kind of a situations. He don't want to see the live destruction of this spinning wheel. And why he want to do that? Why he just focusing on the more spinning on the spinning wheel only? He instead that spinning is the only way to achieve Swaraj for the poorest of the poor and the weakest of the weakest. Because he says that in our society, not everyone is financially or through the or by educationally equal. We are the that time we are considered as the poorest country, and this spinning wheel is affordable and usable to the weakest of the weakest section of the society and the poorest of the poor. That's why it is very important to get Swaraj. So, the title of this speech is Why Spinning Wheel is Very Important for Our Independence. What the main line we can pick from here is Second World War end 1945. Independence was imminent. That is very important. Gandhi accused other Indian independence leader of wanting to destroy Khadi. Introduction of industrial spinning is so coercive for his political project. Spinning is the only way to achieve Swaraj for the poorest of the poor and the weakest of the weak. So let's move into what the next passage. In Gandhi's final year, he grew more and more focused on khadi. His writing in 1946 and 1947 referred to this clothes hundreds of times. He worries about uncertified khadi dealer, its commercialization, the use of fabric and the materials to circumvent khadi rules. He argued that it is necessary to create a young bank to ensure that khadi workers always have access to the material. Spinning will work as a vehicle for Swaraj only if the spinner understands the role it's playing. He writes, if workers themselves lack faith, then the claim for khadi will fall to the ground. So, in this passage, it's talking about in Mahatma Gandhi's final year, he grew more focus on khadi. And why is that? Even his writing in 1947 and 1946 and 47 refer to this close hundreds of the time. He worries about uncertified khadi dealer, its commercialization, the use of fabric and material to circumvent khadi rules. But his worry is that about the uncertified khadi dealers, the commercialization of khadi, the use of fabric material to circumvent khadi rules. He argued that it is necessary to create a young bank to ensure that the khadi workers always have access the materials. So he argued about the creation of the yarn bank, which ensured the khadi workers that they have excess amount of khadi materials. Spinning will work as a vehicle for Swaraj only if the spinner understand the role it's playing. So the spinning wheel is the vehicle for our freedom only. If the workers knows it's how the vital role it's playing. Even he writes, if the worker themselves lack faith, then the claim for the khadi will fall to the ground. That if workers don't believe on their work on khadi, then its claim or its value just completely destroyed and broken down. So the title should give into this passage is why khadi is most important for the Swaraj. So let's pick some important points from here. That uncertified khadi dealers, its commercialization, the use of fabric material to circumvent khadi rules, and the necessary to create a young bank to ensure that the khadi workers always have access to material. Spinning will work as a vehicle for Swaraj only if the spinner understands the role it's playing. The lack of faith, then claim for the khadi will fall to the ground. That's important line. Let's moving toward the last pieces of today's video. The workers are to desist from adopting the meal because they know it is the thin end of the wedge, that to abandon the wheel for the meal is to start the process of colonization all over again. If the workers do not understand that, then they will allow the will to be taken from them. Without the will, the Varna system cannot be recovered, and any Swaraj the worker obtained will be empty. In July 1946, a critic accused Gandhi of forcing the villager to spin. Gandhi replies that Indian villagers gave up khadi because they were tempted by meal clothes. He compared meal clothes to a poisonous drug, suggesting he is freeing the villagers from a kind of addiction. He denies that he is violating their rights. If meal clothes is not available and the villagers do not make their own clothes, they have the right to shiver in the cold and remain naked. So here comes the introduction of the meal clothes. So what's happened next? The worker are to the desist from adopting the meals because they know it's the thin end of the wedge that abandon the will for the meal is to start the process of colonization all over again. That here the workers are not allowed to adopt the meals because if they give up on the wheels, spinning wheels, they start the process of colonization all over again. If the workers do not understand that, then they will allow the wheels to be taken from them. So here this author says that if the workers is not understanding this, then they themselves allow to take in the will from them. Without the will, the Varna system cannot be recovered, and any Swaraj the workers obtain will be empty. So without that spinning wheel, the Varna system are hard to recover, and even the Swaraj given to those workers is completely empty and useless. In July 1946, a critic accused Gandhi of forcing the villagers to spin. So in July 1946, accused on Mahatma Gandhi of forcing the villagers to spin. With that accused, Mahatma Gandhi replies that the Indian villagers gave up khadi because they were tempted by meal clothes. He compares meal clothes to a poisonous drug, suggesting he is freeing the villagers from a kind of addiction. He denies that he is violating their rights. If the meal clothes is not available and the villagers do not make their own clothes, they have the right to shiver in the cold and they remain naked. So he says that even if in any condition meal clothes shut down and completely not available, then these villagers whom he forced to use spinning wheels allow to have allow to have a right to shiver and cold and remaining, because the clothes are not available to them. If the clothes are not available to them and they are not willing to use the will and make their own clothes, now they have a right to shiver in the cold and even remain naked. For that particular condition not happen, that's why Mahatma Gandhi forced them to use a spinning wheel. So the title given to this passage is Introduction of the Meal Wheels, and Mahatma Gandhi oppose it. And what the important points we can pick from here is that workers asked to desist from adopting the meals because they know it is thin end of the wedge, that to abandon the wheel for the meals is to start the process of colonization all over again. Without the wheel, the Varna system cannot be recovered, and any Swaraj, the workers often will be empty. Gandhi forcing the villagers to spin. The villagers gave up the khadi because they were tempted by meal clothes to a poisonous drug. If the meal clothes is not available and the villagers do not make their own clothes, they have the right to shiver in the cold and remain. So that's all for today. Hope you guys understand the passage. See you tomorrow with continuation of this Eon topic. As of now, have a great day.